Hi everyone, so I'm here today to share this Valentine's Day card that I made using Lawn Fawn's Let's Toast stamp set and then Elfie Selfie stamp set. And to start, I'm just going to stamp all the images that I'm going to use in the card on some Simon Says stamp masking paper, and then I'm going to cut out the masks. So this is the little mouse from Elfie Selfie that is going to be part of our scene that I'm cutting out here. And here are the rest of the little images that are going to go onto our card panel. Next, I'm going to take an A2 sized piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock in 110 pound weight, and I'm going to tape it to a piece of chipboard using some painter's tape. And I strongly recommend using 110 pound weight Neenah Solar cardstock if you're going to try to duplicate the Copic coloring in this video. I don't recommend 80 pound. I think that it's too light of a weight and your ink will probably bleed through and you won't be able to get the same blend that you can on a 110 pound piece of cardstock. Here I'm just putting my mask onto the avocado, and that was a little trick that I just did. I will usually stick my mask to a piece of my clothing, usually on my wrist, and then I will stamp it on the page. I found that if I do this, then the mask will not tear the paper when I try to peel it off, but it will also still stay firmly stuck onto the paper while I'm coloring. I'm stamping the images in the order that I want them to appear. So the avocado is in front of the toaster, so I posted him, or I stamped him first, and then I stamped the toaster over him so that when we take the masks off, it will look like the avocado is resting on the toaster. And then the little piece of bread is behind the avocado, so I stamped him after I stamped the avocado, and the same with this Pop-Tart. The Pop-Tart is behind the toast, so I stamped the toast first and then the Pop-Tart. And now I'm just putting all the masks on my little images. Now we're going to draw in the window that is above the kitchen counter. And to do this, I'm just using my little ruler, and I'm leaving about maybe like 1.5 centimeters on either side, and I'm going to go down a little bit below the halfway point of the page, and I'm just kind of drawing in the outline of my window and the window ledge, and I'm using a cool gray marker in C0. So whenever I do my tracing for my scenes, I always use the lightest color marker that I'll still be able to see. And you always want to use a very light marker for these tasks, because ultimately you don't want any of the lines of that original sketch to show through. It's just there as a guide to help you when you lay down your color. So now it is time to draw in the bricks, and unfortunately we're starting with the bricks that you can't see all the way, so I have it's not going to be exactly clear what I'm doing until we get right above the top of the toaster. But I'm using my ruler just to make sure that the bricks are all the same height and then the same width as well. And then I'm just going to color them all in with my C1 marker. Then we're going to lay in our second row of bricks, and now is when you'll be able to see, I think, much better what the technique is. So the technique of making the bricks is to draw them in as little rectangles using the lightest marker that you're going to end up using for your brick. And then you're going to stagger the rows. So the brick in the row I'm working on now, all of those bricks, they're all staggered to the set behind it. And then if you look at what I'm doing now with this third row, I am doing the same thing. I'm staggering them so that the center point of these bricks are like right in the middle of the two endpoints of the bricks below it. And here I was just fixing up, if you don't like part of your sketch as you're going, you think you went too far, you can just go over that with a colorless blender and kind of fix the edge, and it will fade by the time it's time to color in the scene. For the bricks on the edges next to the windowsill, we're going to have them, we're not going to stagger them because we don't have room to do that. And so we're just going to make them all the same, all in the same position, stacked one on top of the other. making sure to leave about 1/8 of an inch in between each brick so that it will, once the bricks are colored in, it'll look like that's the little cement part that is holding the bricks together. And I'm just using my ruler to make sure that the brick on the left side is the same height as the brick on the right side. And then once I have my bricks sketched in, I'm going to go and add my first layer of color. And my first layer of color is going to be C1. And then we're going to do our shading with C3. And after I color in all the bricks with C1, then we will shade the bricks individually. All right, so while we're waiting for this part to finish up, I just want to alert you to the fact that I have a number of giveaways going on this week and through, I guess, next week. One of the things that I'm giving away is the Let's Toast stamp set and die set, an interactive pull tab die set. So if you are interested in joining that giveaway, leave a comment on my Let's Toast video that I posted last week. To enter that, the winners will be announced on the 31st of December. All right, so getting back to the card, now we're adding in the shading. And to do the shading, I'm going to use a C3 marker. And unfortunately, with this row of bricks, it's not going to be so clear what I'm doing. So, you know, I'll explain more clearly when we get to the next row of bricks. But essentially what I'm doing is making an L shape. So from the top right-hand side of the brick all the way down across the bottom, that's how I'm kind of putting in the shading. And I'm holding my marker kind of on its side when I add in the shading. So I'm not using the tip, I'm using the side. And I am trying to make sure that my strokes are a little bit kind of like I'm patting the marker down as I go, like making, I don't know, like just setting the marker on the page, letting it rest there a little bit. Okay if it's jagged, kind of, because that's going to give us the nice illusion of the bricks. And you know how bricks look, that they're, when you look at them, there are all kinds of indentations in them and their surface is uneven. And by using this technique, you'll be able to duplicate that same look of the bricks. So I'm just going to keep doing that, adding my shading in an L shape, starting from the top right hand side of the brick all the way down across the lower left side. And then I'm just going to keep dabbing my marker on its side on the brick, just letting those little like indentations kind of just naturally form based on how I touch the marker to the paper. And there's no you know, magic as to why I chose to do the shading this way with having the L start from the left or the right side. You could do it the other way as well. So you could have your L start at the upper left-hand side going down to the lower right-hand side. And I think that would be fine. You just want to make sure whichever direction you choose, you do all of your bricks that are in the row in the same way, so that there's some like cohesiveness to the picture. So I'm just going to finish up my last brick in my row that goes all the way across the page. And I'm just doing that same like L shading, and then I go over everything with my C1 marker after the shading is in, just to blend it together. For the bricks that are close to the edges of the windowsill, we're going to do the shading all the same way. So we're going to have our shading start in the corner that is closest to the window, and then have our L go to the corner that's farthest from the window. So on the left-hand side of the window, we're going to have like reverse backwards L's for our shading. And then when we get to the right side of the window, then we'll do our regular L shape. So this L is following the way the rest of this shading is following the way the rest of the bricks along the bottom go. And then when we get to the other side, we're going to kind of reverse course and do a reverse shading. And the reason for that is just, that's just kind of how I did it, and it ended up looking okay. So that's what I'm teaching you. And I also think it would have been hard to have the L go the other way. You would have missed a lot of the shading, and there would have been just a lot of brick, kind of all the same tone, which might not have looked good. So that's kind of why I switched up the style there. So okay, so we're just gonna finish up the shading on the bricks, and this is really, really easy to do. It's just, it looks kind of messy as you're doing it, but that's the intent of it. This is a technique that isn't asking you to be perfect. It's not asking you to have completely straight lines. The more uneven your blending is, the better the bricks are going to look, because it's going to mimic that just uneven texture of bricks, right? Of how they look in real life. The one thing you want to do is just make sure you keep a little bit of white space in between the bricks, because you do want to have, you know, room for where the concrete would be to, you know, keep it looking real. Now we're going to go over all of our bricks with a BG70, and we're going over all the bricks as well as the white space in between. And I just did this to kind of blend everything together and just make it cohesive, and to give the cement a little bit of shading. But you don't want to go over it too much. It's just really like a once over with your marker, and that's it, because you don't want to you know, blend away all the hard work that you did on the shading on the bricks. Now we're going to add in the countertop, and for the countertop I'm using some purple shades, B60, B63, and B66. And I picked the start point for where my counter was going to start at about the midpoint of the toaster. So like right at the top of that second knob on the right hand side of the toaster is where our counter begins, or our counter ends and our wall begins. And I'm just working on the shading around the toaster. I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit. I thought it got a little bit too dark, and the trick for that is to just go over everything with the lightest color in the color family you're using. I am taking the masks off of all of the stamps, and I was using my tool-in-one to help me with that. Just cleaning up some of the spots where the ink bled underneath the mask. Just use my colorless blender for that. And now we're going to color in these little stamps or images from the Let's Toast stamp set. And for the avocado, we're going to start with a base of G20, and then the inside of the avocado is going to be YG 11, 13, and 17. The outside rim of the avocado is going to be YG 67 and YG 97. And if you remember, one of the tricks that I taught you in the Copics 101 class is that if you're looking for markers that will match, markers that have the same end number will often match well. So that's why 67 and 97 worked well. For the pit, I'm using E23, E27, and E29. And then for the toaster, we're going to use BG000 for the base, and then BG13 for just a tiny bit of shading around the rim of the toaster. And then we're going to blend our BG000 and the BG13 with some BG11. And I'm just really working on blending in that line of BG13 so that it's not so stark. And then we're going to fill everything in with a BG000. And I'm just adding in a tiny bit more shading on the very edges of the toaster. And for the bottom of the toaster, we're going to use BG13 and then BG18. And the way that I shaded this was I just had a thin line of BG18 going along the top of that thin line, with the BG13 peeking out under it. For the metal parts on the toaster, we're going to use T0, T2, T4, and T6. I use the T0 in the very center of the toaster because that's the part that's going to appear the lightest. I'm using the T6 on the areas that are along the edges of the toaster. And then there I just, my coloring got a little sloppy, so I'm just fixing it up and fixing up the brick behind it that I messed up with some colorless blender and C1 and C3 markers. Now I'm going to blend the rest of the top of the toaster together. I'm blending that T4 into the T0 and now the T6 into the T4. I'm going to go over the lighter spots with a T2 just to make sure that that highlight shows in the center of the toaster, and then just darkening up the very edges with a T6 so that it doesn't lose its definition. For the toast, this is so much fun. So we're going to make a crumb in the toast. And to start, we're going to use E50 and then E53 for the shading. And then we're going to blend it all together with an E50. And then get out our E55 marker. And just with a very, very tippy tip of your marker, you're going to make tiny little dots into the top part and the bottom part of the toast, kind of like going around it in a circle, but leaving the center bare. And then we're going to fill in some more little dots with the very tip of our marker with an E33. Then we're going to lightly blend those dots into the background, very, very lightly with our E50. And now, if you look at the bread, it looks like we have a little crumb going on there. I think that's so cute. For the crust, we're going to use E23 and E27 for the crust of our bread. And I just think that's so yummy. It's making me want to have lunch. And then for the Pop-Tart, we're going to use E50 and then E53 and a little E55, which are the same colors that we use for the toast. And I'm just putting the E55 on the very edge of the Pop-Tart, barely touching it. For our butter, we're going to use Y13, Y17, and then Y19. And I kind of focus the shading on the upper right-hand corner of each of the pats of butter. For our frosting on our Pop-Tart, we're going to use R20 to cover the entire base. And then we're going to take RV34 for the rim of the frosting, and then blend all that together with an RV32. And then go back in with our R20 just to make everything nice and bright and pretty and pink. And then I'm just going over the very edges with my darkest color, R34, just to make sure it stands out and pops. And that's it for our Pop-Tart. Now we're going to move on to making our windowsill, and I'm going to show you how to make a wood grain windowsill. So we're going to use E31 to start, and that's going to be the two sides of our window ledge. And I'm just kind of drawing in the base with the E31. You could also use markers in E40s, I think, for this. That would look really nice. I just used E30 because I just felt like it in the moment. And then I'm just lightening up some parts with E30. For the window ledge, we're going to draw that in with an E33. And as you can see, I'm going over the sketch that I had drawn in with my cool gray marker earlier. And I'm just going to fill in the ledge with some E33 along the edges. And then I'm going to get out my E31 and fill in the center with the E31 just to give the little window pane or window ledge a little bit of depth. And now we're going to start drawing in our wood grain. And I'm going to start with E55. And I'm just going to focus my shading on the edges. And now I'm going to start adding some stripes to the window frame, to the sides of the window frame. And I'm very, very gently touching my E55 to the page to make sure that I leave these little streaks that look like wood grain. And I'm going to do the same thing with my E37. And I am just working, I'm barely touching. I'm not so much focused on where the strokes are landing as to just how soft my pressure is, because if you just have the right pressure and then you let the marker land where it wants to land based on that pressure, you'll have a really, really beautiful wood grain pattern going, I think. So that's kind of what I was doing there. And now just to give it some variation of color, I'm going to do the same with my E27. Very, very, very light strokes, not focusing so much on where they land as much as the pressure that I'm using to apply it. Then I just blended everything together with an E31. And again, you just want to go over it just once because you don't want to blend in all that hard work that you just did. But you do want to have the lines somewhat blended together so that it looks cohesive. So if you just go over, one time with your marker, that should be enough. All right, so while I was talking, I stamped the rest of our scene in, and this is the little birdie and the little mouse and umbrella from Elfie Selfie. And then I masked those off, and then I'm going to mask off the sides of the window so that we can draw in our evening scene. Of course, we're going to have a moon, and I'm going to use this little circle ruler that I bought to help me with all my moon making, and I guess I could use it for other things too, I guess. And I just drew in the moon with a C0 marker, which is my favorite marker for sketching. And then we're going to make the little shine around the moon with a B000, and then we're going to, as we always do when we make the moon, we're going to then have our other colors emanate out from around the room, from around the moon in rings, and they're going to get darker and darker. So it's this really, really beautiful ombre effect, and it just is going to make the moon look like it's glowing on these little characters in the scene, and it's going to be so pretty. And the colors that I'm using are B000, B21, B95, and then B97. And this is a small scene, so we don't have a lot of room, so we're not going to use as many colors as maybe we normally would. But it's still going to look really pretty. The reason that I masked off the sides of the scene is because I want there to appear to be like a little rim of snow or a little rim of caulking around the windows to just add to the realism of it. So I thought I would get a nice clean edge if I masked off the scene. And then the added benefit is that I'm a sloppy colorer, and I probably wouldn't have had the discipline to not color over some of the bricks if I didn't do this. So that was another benefit. And I'm just going to keep working on our evening scene until I get the blend that looks right to me. And as you can see, the masking paper is holding up really well here on the little mouse and bird and umbrella. And this is Simon Says Stamp masking paper, which I find works the best by far of all the masking papers that I've used. It stays put. It doesn't tear the paper when you try to peel it off, especially if you use that technique of applying it to your clothing first. And it really doesn't allow the ink to bleed through. And which is amazing given like how many times we went over these little images just in coloring in this scene, and given how dark the colors are. So for the shading on the moon, I use C0 and B60, and then I just blended everything together with a little bit of colorless blender. I'm just fixing up the little highlights around the moon until it looks right. I think now it looks right. We're going to peel off the masking tape, and then you're going to see that little bit of white, the white edge that I was talking about, but it wasn't enough for me, so I'm just going to build it in. So I'm going to take my colorless blender, and I'm just going to run the tip along the edge of the windowsill, between the windowsill and the evening scene, and I'm just going to keep pressing in my colorless blender until I get enough snow and enough contrast between the sky and the windowsill. And that looks good to me. So I peeled the masks off of our little images, and then we're going to color them in. We're going to use some reds for the umbrella. I thought that red would be a good color to use given that this is a Valentine's Day card, and there wasn't red anywhere else in the picture so far. So I thought a little red umbrella would just be so cute. And I'm using some of my favorite reds here, R14, R29, R39. For the little beak on the birdie, we're going to use YR15 and YR18. And then the bird itself is going to be Y11 and then some Y18 along the edges, and then a little bit of Y19 just to further darken up the shadow. And then our mouse, we're going to use some warm grays, and I'm going to start with warm gray 1, coat the entire mouse, and then we're going to add our shading with a W5. And then we are going to blend everything together with a W1. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of W3 here and there where it just looked like I needed a little help blending in the W1 to the W5. Added some cheeks there, and now we're going to add some little hearts above our toaster and his little buddies. And this is the trio of hearts from the Sweet Friends stamp set that was released last year. I love it. I use it all the time. It's just the perfect little trio of hearts, and I colored them with R46. Then I'm adding smiley faces to our little pastries and our little avocado, and I'm using the smiley faces from the Let's Toast stamp set. These sentiments are from the Let's Toast stamp set. It says Happy Heart Day and then a toast to us. And we even have a little smiley face for the toaster, so I just added that. And I colored in the heart with RV55, and now we're going to add in our white highlights with a gel pen. We're going to make our umbrella polka dotted. We're going to add a little highlight to the avocado pit, and then the edges of the avocado, the edges of the bread. We're going to put some little white sprinkles on our Pop-Tart. And then a tiny little highlight on the corner of the little pats of butter. Another tiny highlight in the lower left-hand corner of the hearts. Some white highlights on the metal part of the toaster. And then also on the knob and on the feet. And then I also added a little bit of highlights to the toaster itself, but you can't really see it because it's such a light color. And now we're going to add some highlights to our little mouse and our little bird. And I'm just putting the highlights where I thought that the shine of the moon would hit them. And it is not just a full moon, it's also a snowy night. So now we're going to draw in some snow. And to start, I'm going to lay down some large dots with my white gel pen. And then I'm going to add in a whole bunch of little specks as well, just so that it looks like there's variation in the snow, that these two little critters are caught in the middle of this snowstorm and they're seeking shelter on this window ledge, and the little bird is of course sharing his umbrella with his little mousy friend. And underneath it we have our little toaster and Pop-Tart and piece of toast and avocado, and they're all nice and warm and cozy in their home on the counter in the kitchen. And that's it. So that is the scene, and that is the card for today. I hope that you give this card a try. I think that you'll have a great time. It is so much fun and it's so relaxing to make the bricks. And I think that once you learn this technique, you could use it for a lot of other things. You can do an outdoor scene with bricks. You can do a fireplace. I would love to see what ideas you come up with. And if you do make any scenes with bricks, I would love if you would share them with me. You could either email them to me, leave a comment here, or tag me on Instagram. All right, I will see you again in the next video, everyone, and be alert for giveaways on my site this week. And if you want to join the Let's Toast giveaway, leave a comment on that video, and I'll see you again soon.